Good morning. Good morning. We're starting in a very punctual way this morning. Welcome to session 23 of the WTO Public Forum. We are going to discuss how the WTO can support trade resilience for women in Sub-Saharan Africa. Let me introduce myself first, if you may. I'm the founder and editor of a European publication, a news and analysis website on trade policy, which is called borderlex.net. And it is my great pleasure and honor to get out of Europe a little bit, at least digitally, to discuss how the pandemic has affected trade in South Africa, with a special focus on how it affected the trade and livelihoods of women, and what lessons can be learned from the episode for trade policy making, be it on the ground and over here in Geneva, in terms of treaty negotiations and whatever other initiatives there can be here on the sides, on the lake side of Geneva. So we have for this panel 4 very qualified and eminent speakers. We have Marta Bengoa, who is, among others, a professor at Johannesburg University. We have Tshengi Ndlovu, who is the president of the Organization of Women for International Trade in Zimbabwe. We have Phyllis Mwangi, who is a trade consultant in Kenya and entrepreneur, very active on the trade field, who has worked, among others, for the International Trade Center in Geneva, running the She Trades program in Kenya. And we have Raul Torres, who is the head of the development policy department here at the WTO Secretariat. Raul is co-author, co-editor of a report on this topic here, strengthening Africa's capacity to trade, which came out this summer in a very timely way for the WTO. So let me kick off this conversation, maybe with Marta, who will give us an economist's view of what we know, what happened in South Africa. Marta, can you briefly give us an overview of the big picture? How has Sub-Saharan African trade fared during the whole pandemic, and how has this affected women in particular? And do you already have a few quick lessons for trade policy here? 4 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Jana. It is really my pleasure being here. I'm talking to you from New York. As Jana said, I'm Professor Marta Bengoa. I specialize in international economics and the Vice President of the International Trade and Finance Association. And I'm going to give you an overview of what is happening in terms of trade, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, and how this is affecting women. So let me give you a broad overview about this. So during the pre-pandemic time, Africa recorded an extraordinary performance in terms of trade in goods and in services growth. So it was coming from a very dynamic period, pre-pandemic, to the point that pre-pandemic growth in exports were in double digits, to 13%. Now with the pandemic, exports obviously has been hit, trade has been hit. They are down by 4.5%, but imports only suffer a decline by 1.2%. We have to remark that most trade in Africa is not intra-trade across African countries, but trade with external countries, mainly with China, with Europe, and with the US. Actually, this is an anomaly compared to other trade blocs, because intra-trade is about 18% of the total African trade, which is really low compared to other blocs. However, despite the pandemic, Africa Free Trade Area just opened for business in January 2021. So the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the AfCFTA, has been signed by 55 countries and has been ratified by 38 countries. And we believe by the end of the year, 2 more countries will be ratifying the treaty. So in my view, this is extremely remarkable. It is actually the AFCFTA. It is an instrument that can be used not only to spur trade, to really push trade in Africa that was coming pre-pandemic from a very good trend. It could be used as an instrument for development. And it can be considered one of the greatest achievements of this century for the continent. It will help us navigate the pandemic shock. So despite the pandemic, Africa is open for business. However, it will be deemed to fail if the implementation of the agreement is not inclusive. So to me, the question is, how can the agreement work to foster a robust participation of women as traders? What can we do? So some context again, where we are, 80% of business in Africa are small or medium-sized enterprises. And the informal sector accounts for roughly 85% of the economic activity. That informal sector, 90% of the labor force is composed by women. So we have to take them at the core. And also the AFCFTA agreement in the Article 27.2 of the Protocol in Trading Services recognizes that necessity to improve the export capacity of formal and informal business. So we need to focus on them. It has to be inclusive because we are talking about young population, women that are young, that they are plugged into the digital world. And that opens huge avenues for creativity because African entrepreneurship is going to be central to Africa's future prosperity. And the largest opportunities, business opportunities in the coming decade are going to be coming and created by Africans who are going to start businesses that they are going to be transitioning from informal to formal sector and generate jobs and wealth. So what do we need to have for an effective trade policy, inclusive policy? We need good governance, and we need to face some challenges because we have unbundling opportunities here. Let me mention some of the challenges and I finish. Women, we need to create an environment in which women must be deeply engaged in cross-border trade. To do that, they must have access to finance, production networks, and markets. So it should be really easy and affordable for a Kenyan business person and women to register and start operations in Nigeria and vice versa. And it would be preferable that if this process could be completely online. So that's what we need to be aiming for. That will promote in-house innovation. Also, in all of these cross-border trade in which women need to be included, digitalization needs support. They are already plugged into the digital world, but we need networks improvement. And we have to be mindful of the heterogeneity of these 55 countries and 38 countries that ratify the agreement. And focus on the elimination of those unnecessary barriers to access funding and, for example, boosting digital payment systems. Now they are having problems with the big operators in the area, right? So those are barriers that are preventing women from being traders in a more wider way and foster trade across African countries, which is, as I said at the beginning, 18% only. How can we do that? Other areas in which we need to improvement, elimination of bottlenecks in trade logistics, for example. We need for small volumes of consignments, which because we just said that we are talking about the small businesses, we need simplified measures in custom processes and clearances. There is where the WTO and the trade facilitation comes into play. we need simplified measures to make the life of those small traders, small and medium-sized traders, women traders, easier. And celerity to approve trade permits, visas for small traders. Those, if we actually focus on this kind of policy of good governance, we can actually have inclusive growth in trade and trade policy that can even be linked to industrial policy. Because to my point of view, there are many challenges, but great opportunities. And it is possible to create and improve the regional integration framework from a gender perspective, assessing all these points. I think.
Thank you, Marta. That was fascinating and really straight into everything that matters. Really good. Thank you. Dishengi Ndlovu, how has the crisis affected women traders in Zimbabwe? Can you give us really a picture of what's really been going on the ground? Who are the women concerned by all this? How can their trading activities be supported? And is there, you have apparently a lot of things to say about the African Continental Free Trade Areas and how it can contribute here.
Thank you. Thank you for I also thank the last speaker, because she has indeed laid a very thorough ground on what we are going to be building on. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I'll speak first in terms of Southern Africa, then zero in onto Zimbabwe to actually give a good context and background of everything. Southern Africa has been worst affected by COVID-19 in comparison with other parts of the African continent, as detailed by the Africa Economic Report done by the AFDB. Zimbabwe, being part of the Southern Africa, has felt the debilitating impact of the economy due to COVID-19. SMEs and women's-owned businesses have been disproportionately impacted negatively by the COVID-19 containment measures. As you would know, that Zimbabwe is actually landlocked. And when I speak of women, women are also not a homogeneous group. Women are heterogeneous, and they represent several sectors which have actually experienced differentiated impacts according to the sectors which they are obtaining. MSMEs in Zimbabwe contribute 60% to our gross domestic product. And we spoke of a whooping 70% of women rely on cross-border trade as a source of their livelihoods. Yes. And speaking about the inroads, the effects of the pandemic, I'm happy to say so far, the Zimbabwe Medicines Control Authority has approved 4 vaccines, namely Sinopharm, Sinovac, Sputnik V, and Covaxin. And as of the 14th of May, 2021, 4.91% of the population has received at least 1 dose of the vaccine. Yes, and going back again in what COVID-19 has done, it is actually, if you know, I would like to put it that Zimbabwe has been experiencing a debilitating economy in the past 2 decades. And this COVID-19 actually added to the problems that Zimbabwe was experiencing. But on a good note, the economy is actually gaining its momentum again. But whatever gains we are making, they have been short-lived due to the onset of COVID-19. The AfCFTA comes at an opportune time, whereby Zimbabwe is one of the first 23 countries to ratify the agreement. And I'm also pleased to say that we are a part of the 8 first countries that were able to validate the national AfCFTA strategies. And all these are just frameworks through which we should be able to actually build a resilient economy after the impact of COVID-19. However, zeroing out on women, we find that women, as women in Zimbabwe, as women's businesses in Zimbabwe, we have hailed the advent of the AfCFTA as a game changer because of its inclusivity. It is a deep agreement that is one of the first agreements to actually incorporate gender provisions within the agreement. But we are also alive that the good provisions of the AfCFTA will not be self-automatic. It won't self-automate. It now gives us that in order for our women to take advantage of this AfCFTA, what should be done? What is expected of the Zimbabwean women to be doing right now as we speak? And I'll actually share with you that the AFCFTA, good as it is, we are still complaining, murmuring a bit, because the sensitization and the negotiation processes, women's organizations were not involved. But anyway, it's not everything. It's not that everything is gone under the drain, but we are taking this opportunity as well to sensitize our women on the AFCFTA, because those provisions, as I said, that they don't self-automate, it means the women being actually knowledgeable about those provisions, so that they can actually hold to account the leaders who have actually made the provisions in the AFCFTA. But also, we are happy that we made noise that the AFCFTA didn't have a dedicated gender chapter within the agreement. And we are happy that we're also in this space where we are discussing about the Women in Trade Protocol as a chapter that is going to be solely stand for women. And we are we assist right now with consultation processes and sensitization, and wanting to actually get it from the grassroots women on how they would like the AFCFTA to work for them. There is no way I can speak about the AFCFTA without linking it to the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, because the success of the AFCFTA will rely heavily on trade facilitation. Because as we see in Africa, it is actually at times, if you look at the statistics, it's mind-blowing that when you are moving goods within Africa, when you look at the freight charges, it's actually 3 times the charge of moving something from Africa to Europe. So all those are the issues which may be an impediment towards the AFCFTA implementation. And we are happy that Zimbabwe is a signatory of the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement, which, by the way, the WTO TFA itself did not have a gender provision. But I am happy that we are seeing a lot of intergovernmental organizations that are actually looking at it and see how those provisions within the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement can also be leveraged in order to work for women's businesses. And in Zimbabwe, as far as the AFCFTA implementation is concerned, is that we have done the strategies as to how it's going to be implemented. First and foremost, what has happened is actually looking at the structure of the goods that will actually be presenting low-hanging fruits to our women. And just as much as well, we're also looking at trade facilitation as the core point that will actually enable the address of the non-tariff measures and the technical barriers to trade that might actually be a setback in actually implementing the AFCFTA if those issues are not addressed. And maybe to actually simplify it further is we're looking, as Martha has said, we're looking at the customs procedures. We're looking at, because the AFCFTA being hinged on an export strategy for all the African countries, it means the rules of origin are going to play a significant role. And we all know how complex this can be. And when we look at the women's businesses and even the lay businesses out there, they need to appreciate the rules of origin. And what it means, these rules of origin, they come complex, because any rule, in order to make meaningful sense, it has to be watertight. And with that, it comes its complexity. But now we need to a space where these rules are going to be unpacked for the ordinary people, so that they can take advantage of the AFCFTA, which is also actually be pushing the Made in Africa a mantra, so that we gain. It's not that the women will be participating for the sake of participating. We've seen that, as Martha has said, women have been leading in the businesses, but they've always remained survival. But we want now our women to also overcome that survival mode and become part of the mainstream economy through first formalization of their businesses. Looking at the statistics, 84% in Africa of MSMEs are not registered businesses. So we're looking at that, at capacitating the MSMEs to go beyond being overnight entities to become part of the mainstream economy. And secondly, we're looking at ensuring that the customs procedures are harmonized, at least maybe first at country level and then maybe at continental level. Not even maybe, it's definitely, they have to be harmonized, because the customs procedures as well have to be simplified, the rules of origin unpacked to actually accommodate the ordinary people there, so that the AFCFTA can work for Africa, bearing in mind that it is the accelerated industrialization that comes with the jobs, and the jobs that are supposed to create decent employment and address the precarious positions which usually come with trade agreements. So all this can be done by actually having enabling women to access correct and accurate trade information, and by having trade information portals which are accessible to them when they are embarking on their journey to actually do their cross-border trade.
Okay.
And as far as exports are concerned, we know that there are technical barriers to trade. And these technical barriers to trade, we know that maybe there could be a necessary evil because they are there to protect the final consumers as well. But at times, this can be an impediment. So all that calls for is capacity building in all those areas that have been mentioned, so that our women appreciate the need to formalize. Because once they formalize, it means they now have got an audit trail. And when we try to address their access to capital, at least those financial institutions have got some authentic, some information on those entities in order for the financial institutions to be able to help them. And then thirdly, thank you.
Yes. Your time, I'm sorry, your time is now over. I mean, we had so many hands-on things. We will get back to individually to one of those issues, but I'm sorry, we have to move on to a perspective from Kenya. We will get back to these individual items because it looks like we need something really holistic and with all the different ingredients that you've mentioned there. Phyllis Mwangi, can you tell us how things have been in Kenya during the pandemic? Is this, is it very different from what the situation in Zimbabwe? And what are your lessons that have, what are the lessons that have been learned from a Kenyan perspective here, solutions envisaged, and what can be done to boost the trading capacity, in particular, perhaps digitally?
Thank you, Yana, for that question. First of all, it's not very different from Zimbabwe. And I'm just going to be adding on to what the two speakers ahead of me have already shared. So it's really a pleasure to be doing this digitally. I'm going to give two perspectives. One, coming in as a consultant who's dealt with thousands of women in business in Africa to grow their businesses regionally and internationally. And my other angle is as an e-commerce entrepreneur in Kenya. Okay, so generally, I like your question. How have things been in Kenya? How are they panning out? So like every other country, in 2020, everything shut down, and we all know that Kenya is a tourism country. Tourism is quite a huge chunk. It's a key pillar to our economic development, and it's a major income earner. So, and we also know, just like Martha said, that 70% of the players in tourism are women. The service providers are women. So in 2020, it went down by more than 80%. It took a plunge because there was no travel and etc. But one of the things we, having been involved in the project with ITC, we looked at the trends, and one of the key lessons is a shift. We noticed that there was a shift that as international tourism was going down, local and regional tourism was going up and is now on the increase. So we don't know if this is a permanent or a temporary shift, but it looks like it's going to stay. It's going to stay for a while. And we noted that extra facilitation is definitely needed here. I'm going to talk about, so that's tourism. Manufacturing is the next one. We've noted a shift in manufacturing, not brick, mortar, and steel, but just soft manufacturing. Especially because of the pandemic, most women in the creative economy, and specifically textile, apparels, handicrafts, and just the fashion value chain, have really pivoted into home decor and selling online, selling their products online. So what we saw was a shift in what kind of product am I selling since since the world is closing in? How to sell online? How to go online? How to create more export quality, authentic African product? And they're really doing a great job at creating online brands. So that was a shift in that space. So more women are getting into the manufacturing space because of the pandemic. Then on agribusiness, I think we can't talk about Kenya and not talk about agribusiness. There's a quote that says, what, food, clothing, shelter? I think this was reinforced, that order was reinforced in 2020 because food became the business of the day. And agribusiness now, took center stage from youth to men to women, but especially women. And this sector grew exponentially. There are definitely more women and youth taking part in this particular sector. And in particular, from the project that we worked with, avocado, fresh produce, are not just in demand internationally, but also locally. Because of the health, awareness that COVID brought about, then people want less chemicalized food, they want healthy food, they want fresh, they want to go green, they want sustainable way of eating that keeps us healthy. And I also noticed, this is definitely happening in Kenya, that other sectors are piggybacking on agriculture. For example, what do I mean? I mean, now we have farm tours and farm tourism. You visit a farm and experience the fresh food, and then activities around the farm. We have food tourism, which is taking center stage in Kenya. Then there's also value addition and in food. Most women are really beginning to take part in manufacturing value addition for food. One because they had excess produce in 2020, began to find ways of how do I preserve this in a safe way and sell it to local market, and then that's beginning to take a regional reach. Then finally, agriculture and technology are, becoming closer and closer. It's becoming more important for most who are doing agribusiness to apply technology to increase their yield. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly say that just two points, and then I finish on what I think the WTO can do for women in Sub-Saharan Africa to just increase our resilience. And the first one is technical assistance. I know this is already happening through the Aid for Trade. And I think this really needs to continue at a higher level. More can be done there. For women in business to build back better and more strategic, I think strategy is very key. There has never been another better time to access regional and international markets than now. So in terms of production, in terms of packaging, marketing, business support, these are critical elements that then we can begin to work on. The second thing I want to say, and is my last one, is in order to foster economic transformation in Sub-Saharan Africa, the WTO must work with governments to fully embrace technology as a critical step to a better economic future. I believe this is long-lasting, it's definitely long-term, and is definitely sustainable. So when I talk of technology, being an e-commerce entrepreneur from Kenya, I must talk about products. I think Marta did mention that the cost, I think it's Sheng who said the cost of exporting goods from here to Uganda is much more, 3 times. I didn't know it was 3 times than exporting to Europe. So cross-border movement of goods is something that the WTO really needs to look at. We need a decrease in trade costs in order to move products across Sub-Saharan Africa. The second thing is, the push to automation. And I think Marta also mentioned this, push to automation of customs operations, just so as to perhaps reduce the number of non-tariff barriers, the challenges that we experience on the border. And secondly, that's products. Now on services, which is my last point, most women are, you are mostly aware of, most of you are aware of Fiverr, Upwork, platforms which are enabling services. And Kenya government, through one of the business support organizations, has come up with what we call the Algeria digital platform. And this digital platform is an online trade facilitation portal in the Kenya government, that then communities are now able to share their inherent expertise through this platform and earn a decent living as they share their skill. So things such as basket weavers, they come in communities. You see these communities very good in beadwork. Another community is great in basket weaving, stonework, stone sculpting, woodwork. So they are getting on that portal and then getting connected to this global value chain of products. And I say all this, now that I mention all this, I must mention that technology is not accessible to most women. Technology as we want it. So it's not every woman who's able to take advantage of this opportunity. So as WTO, there are those women who perhaps might never get onto the digital platform, but quite a number are ready to get onto the digital platform. When I say there are some who might never get onto, maybe they in the very rural areas doing beadwork, elderly, maybe not, but then we have a huge amount of women, young girls coming in, and as WTO, we probably could facilitate from young women to women already in business, to facilitate trade and economic policies, to look into, the girl child education with a futuristic view of increasing the number of women who can access the digital economy in the future. Yep.
Thank you very much. That was, again, quite extraordinary what we've been hearing, what's happening on the ground, a lot of change. It's tough, but it's also very encouraging, all this energy that seems to be deployed there. Raul, tell us, which are the lessons you and your team have drawn on how the trade of women in Africa can be made a bit more resilient to shocks like the pandemic, and what in particular can or should the WTO initiatives that we plenty of them right now and achieve at MC12 and a bit beyond. I mean,
thank you,
so
Jana.
more the Geneva perspective here.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to this fascinating discussion. I've really learning a lot from my fellow panelists. Well, I think that it has been said already by all the panelists, and the main lesson that we have learned is trade costs. Trade costs are key issue that really can make trade more inclusive. If we reduce trade costs, then more small traders, more small and medium enterprises can be able to access international markets, or also to see their profit margins grow, since they have to spend less on the red tape that goes with trading. So obviously, in this area, the main contribution of the WTO has been the trade facilitation agreement. Estimates that we have made have put the cost reduction from a full implementation of the trade facilitation agreement in Africa to around 16%, and it gets even higher for those African countries that are landlocked. And this, this is really something that would make trade be more fluid at the borders, less friction in trade. And another issue that has been highlighted is the digitalization of customs procedures. It's obviously it's also quite important. The TFA does encourage members to take this type of measures, and the combination of adoption of trade facilitation measures that increase transparency and also increase accountability with the automation of some customs procedure also has a very important effect, which is reducing corruption or the opportunities for corruption. And we know that this is an issue that affects women traders more acutely in the poorer countries. So I think that these are the kinds of investments that need to be prioritized. So investments in reducing the trade costs, trade facilitation, automation of customs procedures. And another priority, obviously, is we've heard from both Phyllis Tsienge and also Marta, is the increase in connectivity. So increasing connectivity of all sorts. So not only transport connectivity to be able to move the products better, but obviously, and we've talked about it already, digital connectivity is especially important. But this interventions obviously require an investment from the government, and it may be sometimes expensive to roll out this type of programs at the countrywide level. So I think that one thing that we have seen is that focusing on small geographical areas by creating industrial parks, by creating free zones, can help improve the services that are provided by governments. And this is very important if you want to move to a more formal economy, also to diversify the export base of the country, transform the economy, and move to a from the smaller scale to a more medium scale. And here, obviously, one of the things that we have seen as well is that the main industries that take advantage of these type of zones or this type of industrial parks are industries that have a high participation of women in the workforce. We see that usually the main the first companies that get established are those working in the textile sector, fashion, but also in the services sector. We see that this type of areas where you really improve the connectivity and the services that are being provided to companies. You see the establishment of call centers, data processing centers, and those are obviously you have the women are a very important part of the workforce. And another thing that we have seen is that these jobs are better in terms of the conditions that they offer for workers, but also they pay better. So that's something that can contribute to improve the general situation and welfare of the population. Now, moving on to MC12 and what we can expect, I think, there are two key issues that are going to be addressed, but I see this also as gateway issues. Those are fishery subsidies and the response to the pandemic. But I think that, these issues are important in and of themselves, of course, but they're also, as I said, gateway issues because by having members deliver results in these areas, it could open the way for other issues that are in the pipeline and that are also being worked on that are particularly important for women to also for the WTO to get some results. And I'm talking specifically about the area of e-commerce and also the joint statement initiative on MISMEs, on micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So I think that that's very important. Another area, of course, that needs to be looked at, and it may not be as so much the focus of MC12, but longer down the road, particularly next year, we're going to have the global review of aid for trade, is the building capacity that has been mentioned. And one thing that was mentioned by Shengi and Phyllis was the building capacity to help comply with international standards and also with sanitary and phytosanitary measures. Here, the WTO has a very good program that is working with partner organizations called the Standards and Trade Development Facility that helps build that capacity to meet those SPS measures. I think that something similar would also be needed and would be very helpful if it could be put in place for TBTs, technical barriers to trade, or complying with the technical standards, not just SPS type of measure. So that's something that needs to be looked at in the context of the work that the WTO does on aid for trade, as well as further assistance in implementing the trade facilitation agreement done through the trade facilitation assistance agreement facility that has been set up in the WTO, but that is at the moment having a little bit of a difficulty in their operations due to some members' concerns. So
okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I found this was extremely rich, wide-ranging, and the first idea I get that this is an issue that needs to be tackled holistically, and where trade policy plays, one part only. So it's, having a state being capable of, registering a business digitally, make it easy so that trade policy is not directly affected, but let's hope trade policy can maybe incentivize that further. And then we have the treaties. Some of them have been broached, some of them are new. Maybe to start then with those treaties, because we are a bit in a rulemaking organization, and we've mentioned WTO issues, and we've mentioned the African Continental Free Trade Area. Marta, can you explain us a bit more concretely, what are the specific provisions on women in the that you've mentioned and that Tshengi also mentioned in the treaty? I mean, I'm not sure it's very clear to our listeners what it is exactly that is being said in that treaty. And then what else, you know, what could be done a little bit more better going forward?
Yeah,
Marta.
Thank you. So first of all, AFCFTA is in the phase of building institutions, right? So we have to take into account that they don't even have tariff schedules. They are not in place. So they are not right now discouraging tariff schedules to try to have some of them provisionally and discussing rules of origin. That's where they are focusing on. In parallel with other aspects and topics about building those institutions, but we had to realize that they've been trading for 9 months, period. That's all it has been in place. There are provisions that take into account the informal sector and the role of women, and but they are broad enough. So basically recognize the necessity to improve the export capacity through, as my fellow panelists said, through trade facilitation and aid. But that hasn't been put in place and implemented yet. Because as I said, we are really at the initial stages discussing tariff schedules. The key here is, this is also important, discussing the tariff schedules and the rules of origins, and that affects directly women. Because as Raul said, the cost of doing business in Africa is extremely high. There is high heterogeneity in the continent. Tariff barriers are around 8.7% on average, huge non-tariff barriers, and women face the high transaction costs in border delays, in higher tariffs when they export across Africa, corruption issues, insecurity. So building up this infrastructure and building up this institutional infrastructure, taking into account the phase 2, which is what is called the new generation issues in the agreement, is about facilitating trade in the most basic, like, not paying high tariffs and knowing what are the rules of origin, knowing how they have to trade and what are the non-tariff barriers and simplifying them. And it will come together. If those if that institutional development goes hand in hand on being inclusive, because that will make the work of women that are entrepreneurs, that are working in the informal sector, most of them work in the manufacturing sector, and they can transition with those skills to the service sector, that will empower them. So it is recognizing, and the protocol, especially in trading services, recognize the role of women and the role of the informal economy in Sub-Saharan Africa. But as they are building the institutions right now, as we speak, they are working as we speak in building that infrastructure and institutions, trying to agree on tariffs. They will be helping women per se. Right. We have to take into account that there are regions in Africa that are more developed in terms of trade than others. We have a more advanced regionally, like Eastern Africa or SACU is already a customs union. And the aim is to become a single market. But that will build the capacity of growing inclusively.
Thank you, Marta. Very useful. Tshengi, tell us more. I mean, you've talked a lot about making the provisions on women in trade in the treaty. You need to actually make them work. Can you and you want also to improve them and add some more? Can you tell us more about that? What's your vision there? Did we lose? Did we lose one speaker? No, there you are. Good. Yeah. We don't hear you.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
It was a technical fault.
Yeah.
The question is, sorry, repeat the question again. I was distracted by the meeting.
Yeah, basically, I had to interrupt you a little bit. So I wanted to get back to the issue that you raised, that the provisions in the African Continental Free Trade Area on women need to actually make, be brought to life, and that you actually you're seeking to improve them and to add more. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, as I said, the provisions of the AfCFTA, mainly the main agreement right now, it is the Article 27, which Marta has talked about, whereby the technical assistance looks at actually building capacity on women to export. Remember, the AfCFTA, the main strategy of the AfCFTA on how the state parties are going to be able to revive their economies, and more so with COVID-19, so that they build resilient economies, is for them to export. And first, export within the Africa. I think you mentioned the statistics, the poor statistics around which Africa is trading. Now, when we're looking at women participating in intra-trade and participating in that, leveraging on Article 27. We're looking at them being capacitated to being enabled to export. And how does that happen? It means we speak about value addition. Do they know what value addition is? Do they know what beneficiation it is? And in so doing, the economy is actually two-way. It delivers doubly, because by creating a lot of value chains, it means we're actually creating a lot of jobs, and we're creating also a lot of decent jobs. We're enabling our women's businesses to grow, and actually research as well actually buttresses that when women's efforts are actually channeled in a way that all the efforts the capacity is built on them to export, their businesses will grow fast. And that is actually an incentive on its own, because what has been happening, where we have 70% of them in cross-border trade, they're applying those roads. Nothing wrong with that, because it's part it's also the cultural process of the African woman. But what we are saying, you want them to actually escalate and tap into the AfCFTA through the competitive advantage that is going to come with the AfCFTA, and the comparative advantage. And those are key ingredients for any successful export strategy. This is what we are talking about. And when you talk about, okay, thank you.
No, fantastic. We have one question that came in, but I'll reserve that later for Raul. I have one question for Phyllis. Can you tell us more how, whatever we know of WTO initiatives can help, specifically on the WTO and the African Continental Free Trade Area, can help on the digitalization front? Because it seems to be that the impression I got from Kenya is that there's a lot going on the digital front, plugging into global platforms, creating sorts of e-commerce websites. But this is happening a bit in a vacuum in terms of international treaties. At the same time, there are things happening, trade agreements, even trade agreements with the EU. There is an e-commerce negotiation going on here in Geneva. What's your take?
Wow. And I have 4 minutes. I hope I don't have 4 minutes.
No,
no, I'm kidding. So I think that's a very good question. So yes, Kenya is definitely a little step ahead of when it comes to technology, because we have high-speed fiber network, we have, M-Pesa to help us with payment systems, and getting goods across the country is not hard. We have what we call the border systems, the little tuk-tuks that can move from one place to another. So we can deliver an order, fulfill an order all the way to the end, to the last mile.
Yeah.
However, I am not able to do the same in Kenya. We are not able to do the same in Uganda. It becomes so difficult for me to transport to Uganda. It becomes so difficult to transport to, Ethiopia. So one of the things, I think I'll just give it in, 4 areas that I think we need to look at. Is number one, digital payment systems for, Sub-Saharan Africa, payment systems. PayPal is not in every country. Sub-Saharan Africa, I think If I'm not wrong, there are less than 15 on the continent that are now on PayPal. Kenya got into PayPal through Equity about maybe 6 years ago, which was quite a breakthrough, because before then, people from the US could not buy our products even if they're online, except through a bank account, which was very difficult. So I think digital payment systems begins to look very interesting. That's something we really have to focus on. Next thing, I think we've already touched on this, is logistics. And I think Raul is the one he's talked about. It's very expensive, of course. You're talking about connectivity. We're talking about transport, and we're talking about digital. But more, maybe as WTO begins to engage governments at that level, we might want to think of outlier ways of doing the same thing, but without the infrastructure. What do I mean? I mean, 20 years ago, it was impossible for me to have a phone, for most of Kenyans to have a phone in their home, because it was for the elite, for the rich. But today, even my own mother, who is 80 years old, has a phone and knows how to use M-Pesa. So what happened? Something came along and just, it's like it leapfrogged us to the next, to where the world is, without necessarily having that particular telephone. So so my idea as we engage is to really think in terms of digital. How can we leapfrog? I think working with the telecom organizations, the telecoms, the telephony, the MTNs, the Safaricoms, might take center stage so that they can give internet. Right now, Safaricom bundles are heavily used in Kenya, in rural areas, okay? So if that could be done around Sub-Saharan Africa, where we have major telephony organizations, literally they're everywhere. So if we could partner, they could partner with investors and just begin to work on how, even if you cannot invest in fiber, how about let's do mobile, okay? And in transport, this is just a wild idea that came when Raul was talking. I thought, if we cannot invest in transport, have the excellent transport systems, high-speed railway, perhaps we could invest in drone. I know there's a lot of discussion going in that, in that direction, but Rwanda has shown us that it's possible. Rwanda is now delivering medicine through drone. I know it's a very sensitive issue, it's a high sensitivity, but if we work together as one world, then we should be able to leapfrog Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa to the next level, where you key in your address and the drone delivers, maybe, along the way delivers goods. So that's the second thing. So logistics. The last one is digital marketing, and I won't go into that, but it's really the business processes. And that's where we come back into technical assistance, capacity building, helping the women really discover and understand, if I have one product, I then also have a global market. So I don't need to produce 1,000 different portfolios, which is very tiring, making my business a mile long and an inch deep, but I can go deeper with one product that can be bought in Somali, in Uganda, in Korea. It can be bought everywhere around the world. So it's really just helping the women understand business processes and business models that can scale their business this season, because as the book said, the world is flat. It's an open world. You can produce something in Kenya and deliver it globally, just one. Okay. Yeah. So those are my thoughts.
No, thank you very much. Then now to you, Raul. Well, first of all, there is a question from the audience. Could the STDF, so I think it's Sustainable Trade Development Fund,
and Trade Development
Facility. Okay, I'm not an expert in this issue. So there's a question by Francesca Nunez. Can this facility be extended to facilitate SMEs compliance with voluntary sustainability standards in agriculture, such as organic, and this to enable access to cross-border and international markets? That's one question, and I'll add another one because time flies. The speakers have not, it's very hands-on, but we have. There's a few of the treaties in the making in the WTO, which I find very relevant, very interesting to this topic. Is, well, obviously MSMEs. You mentioned it. Can you tell us more? What's in there? I think the text was agreed yesterday. And then there is also e-commerce, which is a bit more far away, but the text is maturing. Can you tell us more about that and how it could help with these or not with the concrete issues that have been raised in this panel. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Well, going to the first question on the STDF. Well, at the moment, the STDF is very much focused on sanitary and phytosanitary measures strictly.
Okay.
And that's why our partner organizations in that facility are the organizations that have to do with this type of measures, the FAO, the OAI, the Office for Epizooties,
okay,
and the Codex Alimentarius. So all of these organizations that deal with these type of measures. Now, going now to the issue of sustainability standards, I think that that's any type of standards. It's covered in the technical barriers to trade agreement of the WTO. So that's why I was saying that that we need also capacity building in that area, and that we need to start looking at ways in which we can start building that capacity for example, to certify that the products comply with certain environmental standards, building the laboratories that will do any of the testing to see that the product complies with the sometimes very strict private standards that we have here in Europe for any product to be sold in this market.
Yeah.
So definitely that's an area that we need to work on. Now, on the issue of the joint initiatives, and here I think that I want to focus on one key word on the joint initiatives, and that covers all of them. It's engagement.
Mm.
So engagement, because the joint initiatives are at the moment, they are considered a plurilateral endeavor. So it's not an endeavor that covers all WTO members. It's an initiative of like-minded group of countries that want to advance further in these particular areas. Not all WTO members are part of this work. And this is where I think that it's important for countries, and particularly the African countries, to participate in these initiatives and make their views known, make their voices heard, and make sure that whatever outcome comes from those initiatives addresses the issues and the challenges that are faced in African countries, and that are also faced by women. We also saw that that was an important component that sometimes does not necessarily get reflected, but that the only way for us to ensure that this gets reflected is by participating in those discussions and by bringing these issues to the forefront. So that's my main message there.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question here, and I think that would be, that's a French question by Youssifou Agourigo, a Togolese intervention. J'aimerais savoir si la formation des femmes entrepreneuses. Okay, so it's basically a question about rules of origin. How can we? Yeah, can we improve and reform these rules of origin? In a way, yes, that's an important issue. Maybe Tishengi, you have a few things to say, and maybe Marta as well, and then we have to stop. We have 2 minutes. But maybe.
All right. I see that we are really running short of time. Rules of origin.
Yes.
Rules of origin can be very complex, but the solution towards those is maybe it's high time now that we start investing in blockchain technology, because the rules of origin are there to protect this made in Africa mantra which we are driving, like in the context of the ACTA, that in order for the countries to actually maybe protect from third parties joining in, otherwise it will be useless, otherwise the agreement won't deliver. So we have to invest in blockchain, and by going the blockchain route, it actually relieves the exporters of so much obligation that is required and the documentation that is required. This is what I can say in short. And for the MSMEs, it is also a conduit towards the paperless environment. This is what I can really recommend. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll thank Africa for reducing paperwork for the rest of the world one day. Okay. I think, Marta, I'm sorry, I have to skip it because I think we have 30 seconds left. But we terribly sorry, but we have to keep it short. Thank you, all of you. This was a fantastic panel, extremely rich, and we've covered sort of the micro level and the macro level. The challenge now is to make it work. And I think that's where everyone is going to go to now, back to work. Thank you again, very, very enlightening here. And well, I wish everyone a lot of success in their endeavors. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Anna. Bye,
Thank you very much. A pleasure.